This video is a little bit more of an introduction to parabolas. I'm calling it Introduction to Parabolas Part 2. There is a video, Introduction to Parabolas Part 1 that I made, which basically just says, here, when you're given the graph of a parabola, these are the things that we can know. And it just kind of introduces you to the vocabulary of what parabolas are. So parabolas come from quadratic equations. Quadratic means that the highest exponent is an exponent of 2, and you see that in this term here. This parabola has 3 terms, 1 term, 2 terms, 3 terms. That's the most usually that you'll have with a parabola. But if you see an exponent of 2 and that's the highest exponent, you know it's a quadratic equation. They're just different than lines. Linear equations give lines, they're straight lines. You've probably learned about them ad nauseum. And now you're learning about quadratic equations, which make parabolas, which is this curve that we see graphed here. So just to give you the standard equation, and again, this is going to look horrible, but this is what in any textbook you're going to see is it's called the standard equation of a quadratic, and it just is like the most mathy math thing that you can see. And this equation here is just an example of it. So there's actually a number here, a number here, and a number here. And one of the skills that you're going to have to do as you learn more about parabolas is you're going to have to be able to identify the a value, the b value, and the c value. So in other words, you're just saying what are the numbers in front of the x squared, what is the number in front of the x, and what is the plane number. It's not super difficult. You just look at the equation. So for the equation that we're given here, our a value is the number in front of the x squared, and there isn't one, right? Well, hopefully your teacher has taught you by now in algebra that if there's no number in front of an x or a y or an m or whatever letter you're dealing with, you are totally allowed to put a 1 in front of it. It doesn't mean that x equals 1. It just means that you have one of the x squareds. We just have one x squared hanging out there. So our our a value, which is the number in front of the x squared, is a 1. The b value is the number in front of the plane x, and in this case it's a -2. That minus sign is married to the 2, so we have to keep them together. The c value is the number that is not in front of any x's at all, and that is our -3. Again, that minus sign is married to it. I won't go into any details about where you're going to use this, but if you're looking for the vertex or looking for the roots, this is an algebraic way. You can use the a, b, and c values algebraically to figure out the vertex and the roots. So that's just something I wanted to touch on. I guess the other main thing I want to talk about is when you're looking at an equation, how can you tell without graphing it whether the orientation is up or down? So a parabola that opens up, I call it a smiley face parabola because it looks like a smiley face. A parabola that opens down is a frown face, and it opens down. It kind of has a frown face to it. So if we didn't have this graph, how would we know? But we do have the equation. This is really easy to determine. You just look at your a value. If your a value is positive, also called greater than 0, it's going to be smiley face. If your a value is negative, then you're going to have a frown face. So if a is positive, it's smiling. Aren't positive people usually smiling? That's a good way to remember it. If your a value is negative, it's going to be frown, just like negative people are generally frowning. It's kind of a sweeping statement, but it works. It kind of helps you remember. So you can get that really easily from just looking at the equation. The other thing that the equation tells us right off the bat, without having to do any math at all, is the y-intercept. And I talked about that in my part 1 video. The y-intercept is the c value. It's wicked easy. So just look for the number in the equation that's not next to an x, and the y-intercept is -3. And we can see this is true because here is the y-intercept. It's where the graph crosses that y-axis. So again, if we didn't have the graph, that's completely legit. All right, let's move this stuff out of the way. And let me just pull up another graph and see if we can work with that one just to kind of give us something else to see the differences on. Let's do, we'll do this one here. Cool. All right, so for this one here, we're going to go through the same exact things. I'm just going to rewrite the equation that's above it. Y equals -2x squared plus 12x minus 18. So again, a lot of times as you're learning more things about parabolas, you're going to have to come up with the a value, the b value, and the c value. The a is the term that's in front of the x squared. That's our -2. The b is the number in front of the plane x. That's a +12. And the c value is the plain old number that has no x's at all attached to it, and that's negative 18. Going off of this, because we know that a is negative 2, we know that a is less than 0. It's negative. Since our a is negative, this is going to tell us that we have a frown-faced parabola. So if we didn't have the graph sitting in front of us, we're lucky that we do, we would say that the orientation opens down. This means that our vertex, this is the vertex, is at the very tippity top of the parabola. It's our maximum. It's our maximum highest point of that graph, and just goes up, turns around there, and goes back down. Okay, so now we know the orientation. We can also talk about the y-intercept. The y-intercept is just our c value, the number without any x's. And in this case, when we look at it, it is down at negative 18. And we can, since we do have the graph, we can see that that is the case. Sorry, I drew all over it, but that does hit the y-axis down there at negative 18. So that's another thing that we can tell. So those are the things we can determine from the equation. We get the a, b, and c values. We can determine the orientation, whether it opens up or down. We can, because we know the orientation, if it opens down, I don't know if I wrote this or not, so maybe one more thing before I close. So if we have a parabola that opens down, your vertex will be a maximum. If you have a parabola that opens up, your vertex will be the very bottom, and the vertex is a minimum. We saw that in the first graph that I used. So that's your opening up, that's your opening down. Those are the things you can get just right off the bat from the equation. There's other videos that show you how to get the vertex from the equation, how to get the roots from the equation. That's where this stuff comes in, but they're much more in depth as far as, I don't want to make a video that's like a half hour long because you'll fall asleep. And it's kind of a lot of information to throw at you all at once. So, all right, I hope this helps. Thank you.